Hi, and welcome to Newsmakers for inside analysis and behind-the-scenes commentary from Santa Barbara's top journalists and political leaders about the most important news events in our community. I'm your host, Jerry Roberts. This week, it's all politics all the time as we perform a post-mortem on the November 6th election with a look at all the key races and issues from Santa Barbara, Goleta, and the county to campaigns that made news around the state and across the country. Joining me tonight, Josh Molina, who covers politics for Noozhawk. School board member Laura Capps. Nick Welsh, executive editor of The Independent. And former city council member Dale Francisco. Thank you all for coming. All right, so let's start. What surprised you the most? What was the thing the biggest surprise on election night? Josh.
I think there are two surprises.
Just one.
You only get one?
Because you're gonna
Marcia Croninger beating Darcel Elliott by such a significant margin was a big upset. I mean, Darcel raised a lot more money, spent a lot more money. Marcia was really playing defense the whole time during the election, and Darcel's a professional campaigner, and she's had years of running successful campaigns for Doss Williams and others. The fact that she lost so big was surprising. I think you predicted Darcel would win.
I think it was actually Nick, but what surprised you the most?
Locally, that surprised me the most, for sure. Nationally, I was hoping for Stacey Abrams. She could still pull it out.
Almost governor of Georgia.
Yeah, given the year of the woman and all that, but yeah.
The year of the woman, yeah. How about you?
You know, given the fact that we had such non-nail-biting races, the turnout that we had a record turnout for
71%.
71% for off-year elections, and so what people were all fired up. They wanted to go. There was no real races that people could sink their teeth in. The premier race was for the congressional district, and Salud Trabajal, the incumbent, pretty much won that about 12 months ago. It was never really a contest. We had a school board race and we had a city college race.
So
but
turnout.
It was really, I think, a lot of people just showing up because they were so upset at what's going on nationally, they had to express it locally.
What surprised you, Dale?
I think that's right. I think of all the things, obviously I agree with Marcia Croninger, that was interesting. What I think was most surprising to me was what happened in Montecito Water District, where you had two competent incumbents who'd done it. Judy Ishkanian in the sanitary district and Dick Shakowitz on the water board. They've both done a good job. It's hard to really object to anything they had done, and yet this new slate came in and just swept everything away. And that's fine. I mean, sometimes I think the voters just get tired of the old people and they want new people. I think the people who are coming into the water board are going to find out that there's a bit of a learning curve there.
Yeah, well, as far as I was concerned, the biggest surprise was the school board race because I did not expect that 1-2 duo to win Kate Ford. I was kind of hoping that Kate Ford would slide in a second because I thought she was the most qualified candidate, but I assumed Ismael would win, Ish would win, and then when Rose finished second, I was really surprised. So how did that happen, Josh?
Well, Kate clearly distanced herself as the most knowledgeable candidate. I mean, I'm not saying she's going to end the achievement gap in 2 years, but of all of the candidates running, she was clear, specific, articulate, good communication skills.
But who knew that? Nobody. I mean, how did that get out? I mean, I think from our coverage.
She's got years of experience in the district, relationships, and you only have to spend about 5 minutes with her, and you can sort of get that impression. How did Rose win and Ish didn't? Ish didn't really run a really great campaign. He wasn't out there. Rose has, she grew up here. She's raised children here. You cannot overstate the importance of relationships and likability.
And she had a campaign manager, and she had like a professional campaign manager, Mary Rose, and Kathy Maria, the mayor of the city of Santa Barbara, moved water for her. And so Kathy and Mary really gave her an advantage that Ish, who was very soft-spoken and not a chest thumper, really lacked.
I think that Ish ran a good campaign. I think that sure, it's surprising, but we all were saying of the four, we didn't quite know who would win, right? So I mean, I would think it's a woman thing. I mean, we see this.
You're the woman?
You're the woman. We see this across the country. Why not? When people are trusting local government to do what they should, and they see women on the ballot, and next to their name is social worker, and next to their name is former superintendent with Kate Ford, I think that's powerful.
And there was a substantial, significant gender gap in the electorate, in the at least in the ballots that had been sent in by election day.
Sure.
It was plus 6 or plus 7 women or something like that. Any surprises in the school board that you saw, or that's how you would have called it had you been here?
If I had called it in advance, I would have said it probably would have been the indie endorsement team. So I was a little bit surprised that Mark Alvarado came in number 4.
3.
I think he came in
Oh, was
third.
it 3?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Close.
Yeah, so their campaign consultant said that he won because he brought Kate in first and that Mark beat Ish. So that's the way that goes. What difference will this new membership on the board make as a practical matter?
I'm looking forward to serving with them both. I'm relieved that Kate Ford will join us because of her experience. Especially because Kate Parker is stepping off the board after a tremendous service to this community of 12 years. That's happening. Her last meeting is
She was
next
elected
week.
to city council.
Yes.
City college
Yes,
board.
exactly. So I think that given her just her expertise and knowledge of how the district works, to have Kate Ford come in is a pretty great trade. That's how I view it. And I'm looking forward. Rose is, by all accounts, just a wonderful person and this social work background. And she's actually spent time in each of the schools in the district, like substantive time as a social worker. So I'm looking forward to her perspective from that.
All right. So on the city college front, Nick here particularly was distracted by all the money that Darcel was raising. And, I predicted that Marcia would win on the Newsmakers election day lunch pool. The only reason, because there was peer group pressure by you and Josh. Anyway, were we foolish to think that organization and money alone would be enough to win that? Or did you feel like Marcia's keep the community and community college
I
message
thought that was
the
a smart
difference?
message, and I thought pinning the message on Darcel that she wanted to build housing for 7,000 international students, whether that's true or not, that was excellent messaging.
It was really, Jerry, you were the one who, I don't know where that number came from. I think you just sort of
She told
rasped
me.
it out of
She
thin
told
air.
me. No. That's how many more students are from out of the area. And she said, yes, that the college had a duty and a responsibility to build
But
housing
did she
to
say
Because
accommodate.
it's taking from low income.
What's that?
Because the
Well, that
housing-
was the argument.
That's the
Yeah.
argument.
I don't know if that's an
Yeah, I
argument
think
that's
the
true.
thing that people forget, I mean, it really was a classic tortoise and the hare campaign, and Darcel definitely looks like the hare. She had the organizing chops. She, and Marcia, it takes her 45 minutes sometimes to get to the point. But the deal is, Marcia,
I know people like that.
Marcia spent a year preparing, going to city college meetings, watching them before she ever jumped in. So she is like this ridiculously thorough, prepared person. And although she didn't run a flashy campaign or one that we saw, but she was sending out emails, and if you looked at them, they were these photographs of housing complexes that were like 6 and 7 stories high that would sort of engulf and canyonize anything. She was taking the housing message and taking it to a logical extreme or illogical extreme and hanging that on Darcel. And Darcel never really talked enough about education. She talked more about housing. And so the core mission somehow got lost in the shuffle. Plus, I think something has to be said for knowing the district and living in the district where you're running. And
Well, she lived there. I mean, Darcel lived there, but she didn't.
She lived there.
Her Marcia's husband is head of the Riviera Association.
That kind of gives you a huge leg up.
Which is it's organized.
Here's
I mean-
the thing, Darcel ran a city council campaign in a board of trustees race
Yeah.
because that's what she's so used to. Darcel never talked about education policy. It was about inclusion, it was about housing, it was never about actually what's happening on campus and the challenges. And Marcia just had that experience. That being said, all that money, right, gave her a significant advantage to unseat her. But Nick's point is exactly right. Darcel would have a better chance winning a seat on the Santa Barbara City Council than she would in this district.
Does she have any money left? Maybe she will.
Because this district, well, she's in Kristen Senna's district, so that's not going to happen. But this district they're educated voters on the issues that affect Santa Barbara City College. And if you're running for an education seat, I mean, you have to talk about education. And Marcia made that comment. But I was just surprised because there was so much money that you would think that it would be a little bit closer. But
that was like
happens.
60-40.
And endorsements. I mean.
Endorsements.
And the endorsement.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That was
because all
the
she had
thing.
was
It's
Kristen,
an endorsement.
Yeah.
Kristen and Hannah Beth. And it was a big night for Kristen because of what Josh likes to call the Kristen Sneddon factor.
I'll call it that too.
What is the Kristen Sneddon factor?
Well, what is it? I mean, she was behind this election, as you pointed out too. She was behind Marcia and she was behind Kate strongly. And she actually recruited Kate to run. So there you go.
But like her, Kate and Marcia are kind of very high quality women candidates
without
who
the
never got a
endorsement
Without
chance.
the endorsement of the
Of the
Democratic Party.
And our Democrats.
Do you think that we overestimate the importance of the Democratic Party? Josh, particularly.
We've certainly seen a lot of Democratic Party endorsed candidates not make it. And it is a mystery to me what their selection process is. I mean, if they had both Kristen Sneddon, and no offense to Jim Scafidi, but Jim Scafidi, who as a candidate was rather colorless, if they had those two sitting there together, how would they possibly pick Jim?
They didn't. It's
Well,
because,
we
wasn't
don't
it
need to
because
go
of-
back to this, but
Yeah.
she jumped in way late. And she admits she didn't get in until very late.
I think the Democratic Party is still hugely influential because you have this network and this infrastructure of people campaigning for you. The problem with Darcel was it was in this limited district. If it were this bigger district, I think Darcel wins. Duraka Larimore Hall, your buddy, I don't know his exact
a
role.
full and frank exchange of views.
Facebook's a great place for that.
If he's taking less,
Nobody hears it.
if he's taking less of a role in being sort of the mastermind of the politics, which he says he is, I think we are going to see fewer Democrats getting elected because for whatever you think of Duraka, he's extraordinarily effective as a mastermind. And if he's not as involved, we're going to see more candidates who are going to get elected that are not endorsed by the party.
Gail, just email me and I'll send you Josh's personal.
I like that. I like that. I want that on my tombstone. Highly effective as a mastermind.
Yes.
All right. So Salud, to the shock of everyone, was reelected, but he 12 points. That was pretty good.
That is pretty good.
That surprised me. That was a
And-
surprise. We set that over under at 9. What did you?
Yeah, I think I had it at, I can't remember, 9.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a 10.
But I mean, the bigger surprise for him, I think, is great that he gets to go back and be in the majority, which is just a game changer for a job. I mean, he actually can push legislation and get it passed.
All the way over to the Senate.
We're almost at. But no,
Some things.
I mean, I think that Justin Fareed was a victim of Republican triage. The Republican Party had to throw the widows and orphans overboard because there was a rout on, and so that they had to defend defendable seats. And they looked at Santa Barbara and they said, "Why are we going to put money here? We don't have that kind of money when everybody else was getting." What 40 Republicans quit in the past year. Or announced their retirement because they couldn't get along with Trump. So that opened up this huge opportunity for the Democrats. And in that context, the Republicans didn't have the resources to put any chips down on poor Justin, now making a third and perhaps final
What do you
bid.
think? I mean, your point is that it's just
It's very tough.
really hard to beat
It doesn't matter what it is. I mean, in a wave election year like 2010, for instance, the chances of a congressman getting reelected are 85%, an incumbent 85% chance of being reelected.
regardless of.
And
which
in
side
many, yes, and in many congressional elections, it's 98%. So what Justin was doing was taking on an almost impossible task, no matter what the circumstances
Right.
have been.
Yeah.
And Salud, unless he does something really like egregious.
Exactly. There has to be, in order for an incumbent to lose, there has to be some kind of disqualifying scandal or just gross ineptitude.
Like Duncan Hunter, for
Well,
example.
We're saying to be on the way. I mean, we saw, I think we're at 32 Dems flipped seats this cycle.
But they weren't all necessarily incumbents, right? Some of them were open seats or not?
Some
There
were
were some
open,
open.
some were open,
But Dana Rohrabacher.
right. And 18 of those are women.
But after all the buildup by journalists, I name no names, about how important these 6 or 7 seats in California were, it turned out not to be very important at all because it was all done before.
Well, we got to 23 prior to getting to
Yeah.
California, so we're in a comfortable. Democrats are in a comfortable place.
But it looks like Democrats will only win about 3, right?
We're at 2 right now with Katie Hill and Harley Ruda.
Who beat Rohrabacher.
Rohrabacher.
And
But we're potential.
Katie Hill beat Steve Knight.
Katie Hill, yeah, Steve Knight just conceded yesterday afternoon, which is great. And I have to say, back to your point of everybody being so revved up, everybody I know from Santa Barbara campaigned actively for Katie Hill.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it was the closest district and so activated. And, Starshine was there, Planned Parenthood was sending buses down. I mean, I wonder, what the Santa Barbara effect was for her.
I think the Santa Barbara
Because-
effect was.
yeah.
I mean, like on Sunday afternoon, you would see like large groups of women at various places. They all had their Katie Hill stuff
Yeah.
on. They were all phone banking like crazy. You had
Yeah.
people going to Las Vegas or
For Jackie Rosen.
for Jackie Rosen, who also won
Yep.
against what's his name,
Yeah.
Heller.
And Katie Hill, when she was here in Santa Barbara, when you interviewed her, I was with her Monday night before the election, and her finance person told me that the fundraiser she did here was their best fundraiser of the cycle, which is significant. She
Is
raised
that right?
she raised $8 million. So
At Susan Rose's house?
no, they raised about $90,000 at Susan Rose's house from Santa Barbarans, and then but $8 million total, which is just crazy.
Wow.
Do you think that the work of women from Santa Barbara was more or less important than the $5 million that Michael Bloomberg put in?
They might have, on the ground,
Kind of
boots on
a
the ground, boots on the ground.
You said something interesting because the other Katie was Katie Porter, who was running down in Orange County.
Orange County, against Mimi
Walters. But
yeah.
you said something interesting about the difference between those two campaigns, those two Democratic Katies,
Yeah.
that they did differently.
So I've been spending time with their campaigns because of this poverty pact that I work on. But one interesting part is that Katie Porter, who is poised to lose, although it's not definitive, there's still a lot of votes out there. She actually ran a lot of ads with Trump, whereas Katie Hill didn't.
Never
and that
mentioned
seems
Trump.
never mentioned Trump. And in your interview,
I tried to draw her
experienced
out,
that.
yeah.
And that seems to have been a winning strategy.
Because
At this slice of the pie, with such a divisive nature of this midterms, people sort of know where they are on Trump. And you're only really speaking to such a small margin of undecideds, because everyone's so activated, that those undecideds on the congressional, they really want to hear the issues and how you're going to actually improve their lives. And they don't really want to hear about Trump. So Katie Hill's campaign made the strategic decision to just focus on her, focus on healthcare, focus on, the bread and butter issues that, hopefully, got her to Congress.
yeah. In the city, voters approved measures B and C. Measure B will give us even year elections rather. And Dale, you think this is a much needed reform?
That's exactly right. And no, that's the final nail in the coffin of the Republican Party in Santa Barbara.
You heard it here first.
It really is.
Well, I mean,
Actually, with districts, it may not be.
no, I think with
Because I-
districts, it's additive, unfortunately. The problem with even year elections for the city, I think, is, and this is the argument that I made years ago when we had an election on this last time, is it will inevitably de-emphasize city issues. That's just the truth. The city will be the tail end of a very long ballot. And it's true that fewer people vote in those odd year elections, but the people who vote are totally focused on the city issues, which I think is better. But the people have decided differently.
Yeah. So was there a previous election on this?
2015.
It failed.
No, it failed. That was.
It was, I don't remember the year, but it
So
did
it,
fail.
it went from failing to 72% or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In 3 years? How
Well,
did that happen?
Because
David
it's
Pritchett.
an even year this year, and
Oh.
it's just,
Well, the other thing
That's
was
not the only reason that
police and
There was a
fire
campaign.
Yeah.
put a lot of money to oppose it last time. There
Right.
was a active, organized, influential campaign against it before. There was no campaign at all, one way or the other this time, except the Dems put it on the door knockers.
so the thing is that the Democratic Party, going back in the even year, there's a ticket, so they're gonna be out advocating for their
Yeah.
more voter turnout means Democrats are gonna win, lower voter turnout means Republicans have a better chance. So Dale's right, it's gonna take a crossover Republican candidate to win a seat, I think, in some of these
And you think
districts.
that this increase is a bad trend for Republicans has already been made worse by district elections? There's no
right. I mean,
chance?
the district elections pretty much guaranteed 2 seats to Democrats. Period. It's a form of gerrymandering. We always know that districts 1 and districts 3 are going to elect Democrats, whether they get the endorsement or not. I mean, Jason ran without the endorsement of the party and won. This again, you have a much higher Democratic turnout in even year elections. That's just reality.
Yeah. All right. And then we had Measure C. Josh, we'll have a special online version where you can explain the rules of Measure C of how we fill a vacancy in the districts. Measures G and H, though, were interesting because they were both about reapportionment. They both talked about creating an independent commission to redraw the maps for the supervisor seats. G1, H did not. Why?
Democratic Party put all its marbles behind Measure G, which had more members on the committee. It was more diversity, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, 11 members versus
As opposed to 5.
Right.
And so the Democrats, and particularly out in Isla Vista, apparently, I'm hearing anecdotally that students and people who are concerned about Isla Vista and where it fits into the political jigsaw puzzle took the Republican oil company backed version personally.
What's wrong with oil?
Huh? Yeah, they took it personally and reacted accordingly.
So the Measure G advertising from San Luis
Had
Obispo
nothing to do with it.
had nothing to do.
I don't think there was any sort of spillover radiation.
But the Republican, or the specter of the Republican threat was that they were going to somehow split Isla Vista in half, and they would lose their
You
vote,
know,
be
the
disenfranchised.
The long-term trend in the county, at least right now, and who knows, it could change, but the long-term trend is larger population in the North County and a static, more or less, population on the South Coast. Long-term, eventually, that's going to create incredible pressure to keep Isla Vista in the 2nd District. And that's what the Democratic Party obviously is desperate to avoid at any cost. But what I will say about G and H, G is an improvement over the current system.
Yeah, because you don't have the supervisors
Yeah.
drawing their own district.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's the system the state went through a couple years ago. It's
Yeah.
worked very well.
Yeah.
So good
Can I
for us.
want to ask Dale a question here. We talk about Democratic Party. There obviously are conservative young people at UCSB. There are conservative young people at City
How'd
College.
they get in?
But I mean,
Filters aren't good enough yet, obviously.
what stops the Republican Party from being more organized and having more of an infrastructure? Why can't you have,
Yeah, Dale, what stops it? Especially say right now.
if the Democrats are out at 5 a.m. knocking on doors every election day, why can't the Republicans get their stuff together and say, hey, we're going to have a presence as well?
A lot of it depends on the internal party organization and what you have, I think, in the Republican Party, without going out of my way to insult people, you have a lot of
Go ahead.
you have a lot of old timers on the Republican Party Central Committee, and that population has not changed in a long time. I think there needs to be some new people and some new ideas in the Republican organization. But then the obvious big problem you have is there is, I believe, a Republican exodus from the state. People have figured out this is not going to change. If I want to be a conservative and I want to be effective, I need to live somewhere else.
Well, for the first time ever, we now have in Santa Barbara County more no party preference than we have
Right.
Republicans.
And more, and statewide as well.
And the last time we had Republicans doing, respectably out of Vista was when Brooks Firestone
Right.
Was county supervisor, and he was very smart because he brought wine and beer. And he brought
Good
pizza.
old-fashioned American
And-
politics.
But he was a moderate. I mean,
That's what I think is-
He was a moderate.
Yeah.
I mean, elephant in the room. I don't think with a president like Donald Trump, it's the time that
You're
UCSB
never
students
gonna-
are going to be like, "I'm a Republican. Let me form a committee." I mean,
No.
I think we have
He
to
chases everybody
It
out.
But
takes.
they weren't organized before Trump.
Yeah.
But now's not the time to start the revolution.
I mean, look at poor Justin. I mean, Justin Fareed. I mean, he.
is that like his official ballot?
Poor Justin. Poor Justin. I mean, he
Lion
has to,
Ted
he
and
has
poor
to,
Justin.
He has to run sort of under the Trump, mojo, but without embracing Trump and
Right.
without being dragged down. And he was even if he was a much more skillful operator, he would have had a hard time with that choice.
I'll tell you, in 2016, I was chairman of the Republican Party, and one of the things that we had to do was disassociate our candidates from Trump as much as possible. And that's not because I have anything against President Trump, but it's looking at the reality of this area.
This
Right.
electorate,
Yeah.
Yeah,
All I
I mean,
know-
I think Trump was why we had 71% in Santa Barbara County. I mean, that is really, given the lack of races, that was really an impressive
All
number.
I know is Austin Stukins
Yes.
unfriended me on Twitter this morning, so I guess I just feel used. Election's over. He has no need for
He's
me
on his way
anymore.
back to New Orleans, probably. No, I think he was going to get a place here in Carp or something like that.
I blocked him, so we're good.
All right. Austin, I'll give you Josh. All right, Josh, your coverage of the Goleta mayor's race was second to none. In fact, it was exactly second
It is.
to none.
It is the good land.
Yamamura wrote about that race. That's,
But in reading your stories, I have to say I was
did.
mildly surprised on election night that Paula won so easily.
You know why?
Mildly.
Democratic
She's a
Party.
woman.
Democratic Party.
You're the woman.
You're right.
And well, also, let's just put it, Goleta has experienced this great sort of instant pop-up in the last couple of years of all this developments that had been simmering for however long, and there's sort of a big reaction against it. And Bennett was sort of, although he's a Democrat, he was very much friendly to that. Michael Bennett.
That's for you, Sheila Young.
Yeah.
Sheila Lodge.
This is one where the Democrats, where Paula got the message right, unlike Darcel. Like, Bennett is responsible for all the traffic and congestion and housing in Goleta, and if you elect him, we're just going to see more and more and more. She's partially right.
Sounds like Marcia's house sign, actually.
And that was super effective. Bennett was on the council when a lot of these things were approved a long time ago. It's certainly not all his fault. But Parodi just connects with,
She does connect with
she's
people.
friendly, she's
Yeah.
nice. When you talk to her, you don't feel like you're like, oh my goodness, I need to talk to this elected official. She's really nice, she's really down to earth. She talks to you like she's just a friend of yours.
Yeah.
And
she means business.
in the Democratic Party,
Why didn't you say these
campaign
things
for-
before she was elected? I'm just curious.
I did. I did say she would win, unlike you.
No, you did.
I'm
You
happy
did.
we're talking about Goleta because you know that this show has a bad reputation of ignoring Goleta.
I know.
So we
I
should have started with Paula Parodi.
Okay.
It's never too
Well,
late.
thanks for
oh, wait,
that,
it is
Josh.
too late.
Thanks for our leader. Okay, on state props, Prop 6, which was the
Repeal the gas tax.
Cynical
Cynical.
approach. Cynical
were you
approach.
surprised? This was to repeal the 15-cent or 12-cent
Right.
gas tax that the governor.
It was
was-
written in such a way it was guaranteed to fail.
Why? I thought. I mean, wasn't it supposed to be like a get out the vote thing for Republicans?
I think if it appeared on the ballot in language that actually advertised what it was doing, yes. But when you put a ballot proposition that says, let's decrease funds for roads and highways, it's probably going to lose.
So you think it was
That had a lot to do with it.
cynical on behalf of the Attorney General?
Yeah, yes, I do.
But you think it was cynical that it was there at all?
I do. I think it was about Republican turnout.
Yeah, and then when they needed to go elsewhere, as you point out, they pulled all, I mean, there was no more money to go in there, right? I guess, I don't know. Well, it's interesting because California is no longer an anti-tax state. I mean, this is,
Well, if you look at bond issues, it's California has had that trend for a long time, and most of the bonds on the proposition section passed,
The only one that didn't was the water bond.
the water
Yeah.
bond didn't pass.
which was a little surprising. But then I think there have been 3 or 4 water bonds in the last recent elections that have passed, and maybe people are just tired of that.
Well, the housing bond passed, the
Yeah.
$5 billion Proposition 1, but Proposition 10 for rent control failed.
Well, rent control was interesting. First of all, it wasn't really rent control. And what was interesting there is that the single backer.
Well, it was giving
Right.
locals the
It was
power.
going to give locals the ability to do it easier. I think the problem there was that the person who was supporting it the most he has a foundation for AIDS in LA, and he's has a reputation of being extremely difficult to work with. And I think you need to have a very broad coalition in order to get something like that passed. I think the real estate lobby spent like 3 times more money. So you really did, if you're going to have a chance, you needed a breadth of a coalition, and it was a one-man band, and you can't do it in a statewide
And there was a
proposition.
broad coalition against
And
it.
there was, I mean, against it. It was landlords everywhere.
Right. Which are, most landlords are mom and pop businesses,
Yeah.
the vast majority.
And it was interesting, the signs they used. It was actually very cozy. It was like almost like 1970s hippie artwork. I mean,
The local ones?
But no.
yeah.
Oh, that was a Santa Barbara special. That
Okay.
was only in Santa Barbara.
Okay.
Against Prop 10?
Against Prop 10.
Yeah, they look like artwork. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like, you think it was really hippie-like.
I missed those. All right, and then, Dale, I think you were probably on election night pretty wound up watching the returns come in on Proposition 7.
I was most concerned about Prop 7, that's correct. And
which
this,
would give us permanent daylight savings time, except it wouldn't.
well, it was one of those confusing propositions. And as I was telling you earlier, Jerry, as we know, the most virulent opponent of this proposition was Hannah Beth Jackson.
She did, yeah. This was not Hannah
And
Beth.
she wrote an eloquent essay about how horrible it would be if we had daylight savings time all the time. And I can understand that point of view. What I think millions of Californians would like is for the time to stay the same year round. I personally don't care if it's standard time or daylight saving time. Pick one and stick to it.
I agree.
Right, and the timing was perfect because it came in the same week we just had the change
Exactly.
of time,
Right.
so everybody
Right,
was
everyone's
grumpy.
like complaining.
Yeah, that was
Well, it
really.
passed pretty easily.
It passed
want
pretty
to-
Oh, like
easily.
2 to 1, right?
I want as much daylight as possible.
Well, that's what I thought, California sunshine, what's the big
But,
mystery
you know,
about it?
Hannah Beth, she really stuck her chin out on that one.
She really
Why?
did. She took a big risk.
What was that?
Well, she could have alienated a lot of voters. But in
I
fact,
think she's okay with that.
I think this proposition, unfortunately, is not going to make much of a difference.
It
No.
was making
Good.
Because it depends on changes to federal law to have any effect. And
Well,
they're not
first the
going to happen.
legislature has to do something. And
The
then it goes-
legislature has to do something by 2/3,
Should-
and federal law has to change.
Do you think it was more appropriate that we have the vote on daylight savings time or the farm animals or the dialysis clinics?
Jerry, I think this ballot was the definitive argument against the voter initiative.
Proposition 8 did something to dialysis clinic, the most expensive initiative in history.
You're kidding.
No, $111 million.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And
Two-
nobody
and two
even knows.
companies.
Okay, $111 million, and nobody knows what it really does. I'm sure that somebody somewhere knows, but
It's not
It
doing
will
anything
require,
now.
it would
It's
require
not doing
more
anything.
SEIU dialysis workers.
All right, that's what the point of it was. Okay, so statewide races, no surprise, Governor Newsom. Steve Poizner, who was running as an independent, a former Republican, apparently is now going to lose after winning most of the night, which
Yeah.
is too bad because it would have been a pathway for people like yourself,
Well, he
Dale,
was-
to run for office again.
By abandoning my principles. The thing about Poizner is I think he would have been a good
Yeah, I
insurance
do too.
commissioner. He was highly
He was
qualified.
the last time
He was last time, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so that, but then Marshall Tuck
Looks like he'll pull it out.
Superintendent of Public Instruction, charter school guy, kind of.
Yep.
Pretty much against some Sacramento hack. Oh, Tony Thurmond.
Tony Thurmond, who people
was,
really like.
was
Yeah.
running. But again, this was the most expensive race, statewide race on the ballot. They spent more money on that race than for governor.
Sure.
And
Well, you
why?
also see LA school board, they spend $4 million to each, so there's just a lot of money in charters for sure. And there's a lot of money in, like, guess what, teachers union. So I'm not surprised they spend so much money.
So, as a practical matter, does the Santa Barbara School Board pay close attention to what the superintendent of public instruction has to say about anything?
Oh, certainly. I mean,
Ever?
there's code. Yeah, I mean, there's, but it's less important than one might think.
All right. I want to go back to the national for a minute because in the first blush of the election, there was a lot of jubilance on the part of Democrats about winning the House. But in the last couple of days, it's become clear that the Senate is never going to be able to be won by the Democrats again. I mean, the way that things are being set up and people are sorting each other out in red states, blue states. Do you agree with that?
I don't necessarily agree with that because politics is always surprising. However, it was an interesting night for both parties, I think. The Democrats obviously, didn't do as well as they had hoped. And the Senate is a real bright spot for Republicans, especially for conservative Republicans. It's a much more conservative body, it's a much more pro-life body than it was before this election.
And a much more judge-appointing body.
A judge-appointing body, appointments in general. I mean, a lot of Trump's appointments, Department of Justice and other places, have been held up. I don't think that's going to happen come January.
Yeah.
And Susan Collins of Maine and Murkowski of Alaska, the party moderates will have a lot less leverage.
They will have a lot less influence, and that's exactly right. I mean, people like Corker, Flake, McCain obviously are gone, so it's a big change in the Senate.
Does that depress you?
I'm pretty excited that Democrats took back the House. I think that, sure, that was expected, but it's still a huge change. We've had the last 2 years a very controversial administration with virtually no oversight because Paul Ryan just abdicated any kind of role. So we've had the House Oversight Committee has done nothing, and now we're going to have chairmen that are Democrats. We're going to have chairman of the Intelligence Committee. I mean, it's just going to be, finally what the Congress is supposed to be, is some of a checks and balance.
And what about Justice Ginsburg falling
I
and
hope she's okay.
breaking her ribs?
I hope she's okay.
3 ribs, right?
I know. I hope she's okay. But I mean, I'm curious about that Senate point because so many Democrats flipped 7 governorships, including Kansas. So I'm curious what that analysis is that the Senate will never be Democrat again because if a woman, a Native American woman,
Well, because the
can win in
states are not
Kansas
equally
statewide.
divided. I mean, on every election night, you look at the map, and it's
Sure.
like 3/4 red and little teeny amounts of blue because they just win more states, and our votes are totally diluted because somebody in North Dakota, gets to vote for 2
Sure.
senators, same as we do.
Yeah.
And there's just more states that are red, and it's going to continue on that path. I believe. I don't know. Josh, how many more days until the next election?
I just wonder if we're still going to be talking about Jim Scafidi on the next election.
Oh, I'm never going to stop talking about Jim Scafidi. Isn't that the greatest argument against early endorsements ever?
Oh my gosh, we're going back
Come
there
on,
again.
Jim. Come on.
Don't be mean.
I'm not.
Don't be mean. But
It's
I
up there.
agree. This idea that somehow the party has to come out and endorse people as soon as there's a chance to do it is crazy. To me.
Kristen Sneddon should be the flag bearer of the Democratic Party, and she's not. I mean,
You know why
she's
she isn't?
solid.
What I suspect is the deal here is that Kristen Sneddon and Kate Ford both come out of the charter school tradition. So, Kristen Sneddon was the chairman or the president of the board at Peabody, which was a charter school.
That's true.
And I think that the Democratic Party really has a hard time accommodating charter schools. And I think, Kristen was going to have a hard time getting the Democratic Party endorsement, even if the timing had worked out.
I don't I mean, I think that that's a statewide argument that there's a division between charter versus non-charter, but I have not experienced it here, and we have.
But we're not talking about for-profit
Yeah,
charters
I
anyway.
mean, we have a progressive board as it is now, and we're supportive. We're thrilled with
Was it
the
Doss
free
Williams
charters
on the
that we
board
have.
of Peabody Charter School?
I mean, so
Is he trying to get us
Peabody Charter School is
while
a
ago.
charter school, but they have union employees. It's not an anti-union
Right.
split. So I'd be, if that was part of the calculus, I'd be surprised. I think Kate got in after the endorsement, Kate Ford. So I think it's more to the timing than it is to her qualifications or her
Do
affiliations.
you agree with me, Josh?
Yes, the Dodgers will win next year.
Yeah, okay, let's take that. With the election of Kate Ford and the re-election of Marsha Croninger, with the support of Kristen Sneddon and in one case Hannah Beth Jackson, that those four, along with Laura Capps, who was at her own tiffs with the Democratic Party, just ask Mayor Hal Conklin about that, that there is now sort of an informal caucus of independent, very high quality elected women officials who will act as a counterweight to the Democratic Party in future elections.
I
Do you
think
agree with him on that?
Can you repeat your question?
All right, well, it's good to know that Josh is on board with that, and thanks to Josh Molina, Laura Capps, Nick Welsh, and Dale Francisco. Thank you all for watching. Please visit our website, newsmakerswithjr.com, to check out my blog posts on politics and media in Santa Barbara and beyond, and also our YouTube channel, where you will find, if you have insomnia, an archive of past shows and interviews. Thanks again to our director, J.P. Montalvo, to our crew, Brad, J, Tara, Adam, Coral, Brad, and Troy. Really a lot of crew. And as always, our senior, top-ranking, high-powered, high-energy executive producer, Hap Freund. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on Newsmakers.